Welcome back, tuning into today's video. Well, here we go. It's the final and official GazWebBiz.com Winter 13-14 forecast. We're going to have a look at everything we've been looking at through the autumn, and then I'm going to come to a forecast at the end of the video about what I think is going to happen for the winter. It's a really challenging winter to pin down, this one, and as we go along I will explain the reasons for that, why it's been such a challenging winter. Signals have been very conflicting. Now, before we go on with the video, just talk about the advertising. There's video ads on my page at GazWebBiz.com. If you hit play on the video ads, you'll be supporting GazWebBiz.com. Thanks very much for doing that. Gaz Shop is open, so if you want to do any Christmas shopping at Amazon, click through the Amazon banners in Gaz Shop. You'll go through to Amazon to do your Christmas shopping as normal. GazWebBiz will get a royalty fee on anything you purchase. These things do make a big difference to the website. They pay for the website, they allow me to have the website, sit here to talk to you via the website. So thanks so much for getting involved. I know you have been doing these things for the website. Keep doing it, and as I say, thanks so much for doing that. I've still got a bit of a cough. You've probably been noticing in videos. It's a lot better than it was a couple of weeks ago, but I've still got it hanging on for dear life, so at times I may have to stop and have my drink of water, particularly as this is going to be quite a long video, so I hope you bear with me if I have to do that. Now, going along with it, just talk about the seasonal models that we did last week. They were very conflicting, the same as all the other things we're going to look at in this video, actually. Seasonal models were very conflicting. If you want to see last week's video, see what the seasonal model roundup was showing for the winter, it's on the seasonal page, or the link to it anyway is on the seasonal page, so click on that, you'll go through to the seasonal page, and then you'll be able to select the final Winter 13-14 season model roundup. They were very conflicting. The models had no real signal. Some were cold, some were mild. Couldn't really decipher too much from that, and that's going to be the same as this video as well. So let's get on with the video, and the only other thing to say is that this video will be kept on GazWebBiz.com for the foreseeable future. So it's going to be a long video. If you can't watch it all in one sitting, don't worry, you'll be able to come back and see it whenever you like, and really just enjoy the video. Thanks for supporting the website, and yeah, enjoy the video. So we're going to start off with the first thing we looked at, which was back in June, on the start of June. I did the NAO forecast for the winter of 2013-2014, and you'll be able to find that if you want to see that and recap on it. The link to it is on my seasonal page again. It was the tripod we was looking for in the Atlantic in May sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic Ocean. What we was looking for specifically was the warm, cold, and warm bands, and we did in fact have a tripod in May 2013, and I said at the time when I did the video at the start of June that that is a starting point for maybe looking at a negative NAO for the coming winter. It's only a starting point. It is not by any means the be-all and end-all. It makes up a small percentage of this overall forecast, but nevertheless, for the starting point back in the start of June was that the May sea surface temperature anomalies have the tripod, so in theory that should support the chance of the tripod coming back through the winter, and that in turn should help us get a negative NAO if indeed the tripod does come back. So that was the starting point. We've then, as we've gone through the winter, been looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies across the globe. We've been looking at the Pacific and the Atlantic. Let's start with the Atlantic first of all, because that's what we're just looking at in terms of the tripod. We haven't got the tripod yet. We've gone to the 28th of November, which is the last sea surface temperature anomaly that we've got. We haven't got the tripod. We have got a very warm Atlantic. There's a lot of warm water in the Atlantic. Not surprised, because we're in the warm phase of the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. But we haven't got a tripod, we haven't got a warm, cold, and warm band. Now, what I would say is that because the Atlantic is so warm, I wouldn't be surprised if the tripod did emerge, to be honest, at any point this winter. But we haven't got it at the moment, so we're not starting off with a tripod. So we're going to be looking for the middle and latter stages of winter, perhaps, for that tripod to come back. So haven't got it at the moment. Have got a warm Atlantic moment. We're particularly warm to the south of Greenland, just highlighting this area up here. that does, in some instances, help the chance of blocking. But really you need the other part of it. You need the cold and the warm band through the tropics, which we don't necessarily have at this stage. Now, we've also been looking at the Pacific. We've been looking at the ENSO region, which is the region that stretches across the equatorial Pacific from Peru to Indonesia. We've warmed through the autumn, haven't got an El Nino. I don't think we're ever going to get to an El Nino this winter, but what we have got is a warming of the ENSO region, taking us from the La Nina side, the cold side of ENSO neutral, to the El Nino side, the positive side of ENSO neutral. So I think we can expect further warming, probably along the date line, through the course of this winter. Won't take us to an El Nino, but what's interesting is that this middle part of the Pacific Ocean is warmer than this eastern part of the Pacific Ocean off the Peruvian coast. So that's cooler there. When that excuse me, when that happens, that is a signal for blocking up across North America, and it can, in some instances, indicate a cold winter for northern parts of America. For us, it depends what the Atlantic's doing. But that is a signal, one of the signals anyway, that I'm using to predict that they're going to have a cold winter, but have a quite a long while in the United States. It doesn't necessarily need to reach an El Nino threshold in this area here in the Pacific. Just as long as it's warmer there than off the coast of Peru, then you can, in some instances, get a cold winter for particularly northern and eastern parts of the United States. Also got this warmer water up across the northeastern part of the Pacific Ocean, and that's quite interesting. That's quite unusual. Normally it's a very cold place up there. So that warming probably coincides with a lot of high pressure that's going on around Alaska. We get high pressure up there, and that again just in some instances transferred to low pressure on the northern and eastern side of the United States. But very interesting patterns across the oceans just at the moment. I think particularly the Atlantic is quite interesting in the fact that it's very warm. Haven't got the tripole yet, but if that tripole does emerge through the winter with what we're seeing in the Pacific, then we have got the chance of getting some colder weather this winter. I do believe that. Now, I'll just say that the overall ocean setup is very much in line with the 1940s, 1950s. The 1940s and 50s were an era where we had the warm Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation coinciding with the cold Pacific decadal oscillation. When you get the cold Pacific decadal oscillation and the warm Atlantic oscillation together, that is another signal that can bring us colder winters. I think it's one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things that's been delivering this run of cold winters that we've been having in recent years since, 2008, 2009, I think the first colder winter. I think it's the warm Atlantic coinciding with the cold Pacific that is coinciding with this. But what's interesting is that we don't necessarily have a particularly cold PDO at the moment. This is where the PDO region is just here. Just there. It is a little bit on the cold side, but it's not a really cold PDO. It may turn colder actually back through winter. Wouldn't be surprised if it did. And if that was to coincide with a tripole setting up in the Atlantic, then we could start to get some colder weather this winter. But overall, the oceans are pretty neutral, and it's hard to make a decisive forecast for this. It's easier for the states. I think the eastern states will have a colder winter, as I say, but for the Atlantic, for Europe, because we're dominated by the Atlantic and we haven't got the tripole, it's harder to make a definitive prediction. Okay, let's go on and have a look at solar activity. Of course, solar cycle 24 is nearing its peak, if it isn't already at its peak, or it hasn't already been at its peak. It's a much weaker cycle. His solar cycle 23, you've seen this chart a lot, very intense solar cycle 23 was. This is 24, much weaker solar cycle, but we have had a spike in solar activity this autumn. So with actually in October, haven't got November here yet, but October actually saw the most active month since the end of 2011. We saw quite a big ramp up in activity through October, and November's been a pretty active month as well. So you'll remember 2011, 2012 when we had this first spike in solar activity, certainly had a milder winter than many of the winters starting in 2008, 2009, go on to 2012, 2013. 2011, 2012 was a milder winter. Did have a very cold spell setting up in February, and Eastern Europe got a very severely cold winter, actually. But we was just we just had a more active Atlantic Ocean, really, and that did coincide with this spike up in the solar activity that we had in that time. Now, I've had another spike in the solar activity, but interestingly, the activity is going off again. So today, for instance, the solar disk on our side of the disk, solar activity is classified as very low at the website solarham.net. We have got a few sunspots scattered about, but not much going on, really. So it's an up and down solar cycle. It has always been an up and down solar cycle. And it still continues to be. We've had very sort of active, or not very active activity, not compared to other solar cycles, but we have had a spike in activity through October and November. But it appears we're going quieter again as I do this video at the end of November into the start of December. Now, this could spike up again, and if it keeps spiking up, then I think it does probably imply that we'll have more of an active Atlantic this winter. Nevertheless, it's still, even with the spikes, a very weak solar maximum. So we can't really judge it like we would say in the 1990s or 1980s or 1970s, when we have very active solar cycles and solar maximums, and they coincided with quite mild winters. We can't really judge this in the same context, because although again the spikes in activity, we're not anywhere near the sort of levels of activity that we was in earlier solar cycles. Just want to show you this. This is the AP index, what we're going to look at down here. I've not looked at this before in any of the other videos, but just throwing this in, this blue area down here is really reflecting how much of this solar activity is getting to the Earth and is impacting the Earth, because there is a theory that it's not so much the sunspots, it's not so much the sunspots, I should say, that are important. It's how much of the radiation, how much of the activity is actually hitting the Earth that's important. And you'll see that with this blue line here, this is for the whole of 2013. We're not seeing the solar activity particularly impacting the Earth. So we did have some spikes earlier in the year, and this red area just here is the recent increase in sunspot activity, the ramp up that we've had through October and November. But you'll see that the blue line down here doesn't really correspond with those red lines spiking up. Interestingly, that just there is where the solar activity has now dropped down to. So we have had a big drop in activity in the last few days. But it's this area down here that's interesting. We've not really seen the sunspots impacting the Earth as you would expect, and that could imply that even if we do get these, or continue to get these spikes in activity, it may not preclude the chance of blocking. It's very interesting that back in the winter of 2012, 2013, which is just over here, again, these blue lines didn't really spike up. This blue line didn't really spike up that much. It just implies that the sunspot activity is probably not impacting the Earth in terms of the energy of the sun and the radiation quite as you'd expect. But I thought I'd just throw that in because it's a bit of a caveat, and again puts things into context that whilst we are seeing an increase in sunspot activity, it's by no means definitive that puts us in a milder than average winter. Nevertheless, it probably is going to be one of the more intense sort of winters in terms of sunspot activity that we're going to have in this solar maximum. The solar maximum is nearly over now, so we'll be dropping back down into solar minimum by next winter and the winters beyond that. So it is going to be one of the, along with 2011, 2012, it's going to be one of winters that has more activity, I think, than we've been used to. So it swings and roundabouts, and it's hard to judge quite what the impact is. Now, hurricane activity, we'll be looking at that. Been a very quiet season with just 14 depressions, 13 total storms, 2 hurricanes, and zero major Category 3 or above hurricanes. So it's been a very, very quiet hurricane season this year. Idea behind hurricanes is that They're transporting heat from the tropics to the pole. When they dump heat in the pole, you get a lot of heat being dumped into the pole, you get a lot of hurricanes. It can sometimes coincide with the risk of blocking through the winter. We haven't had hardly any hurricanes this year, so we don't need to worry about that. And it is one of the things that may sort of imply that we're less likely to have blocking this winter. Now, for QBO next, the quasi-biennial oscillation, we're in the westerly phase of the QBO. What the QBO basically means, or the westerly phase of the QBO basically means, is that we're increasing the zonal westerlies through the mid-latitude. So, a westerly QBO should, in theory, go with a milder winter, and an easterly QBO, when the zonal winds through mid-latitudes decrease, they should go with cold winters. But it is never as simple as that. The grey areas are the westerly, or is the westerly QBO, where we are just here in 2013. Yeah, we're definitely in a westerly QBO. We're probably going to stay there until early 2014 at least. So much of this winter, I think, will be a westerly QBO winter. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a mild winter. For instance, we've got 2008, 2009, 2008 just here, 2009 over here. That was a westerly QBO winter, but it was the start. It was the very first one of this run of cold and average winters that we've been in. Let's have a look for another one. And yeah, what about 1990, 1991, which was a westerly QBO winter and was a cold and average winter as well. Nevertheless, some westerly QBO winters do coincide with mild winters, and 1999-2000 is certainly one, as is, let's have a look at another one. Yeah, what about 93, 92, 93, there's 1993 up there, there's 1992 up there. That was a westerly QBO winter, was a mild winter. 2002-2003, again, a westerly QBO winter, which was a milder than average winter also. So, it probably is more important what else is going on with these excuse me, QBO phases. You've got a lot of that solar activity with westerly QBO. That probably does go. They probably go together to some degree, and that's when you tend to get the mild winters. You've got less solar activity or weak solar activity, for instance 2008, 2009. Then that's when you can get the cold winters occurring with the westerly QBO. Now we're at solar maximum, but it's a weak solar maximum, so a normal solar maximum with a westerly QBO would almost certainly be a milder than average winter. And any other time when I was doing this forecast, these things together, the solar maximum with westerly QBO, would almost certainly lead me to a milder than average winter conclusion. But it's just the caveat that the solar activity is weak. It's a different solar cycle to one we've had for a long, long time. So the westerly QBO perhaps not quite as impactful as it could be. Stratospheric conditions. We've got a cold stratosphere. Here is where the stratospheric temperature currently is, and it's below average. Went very, very cold for much of November. It's actually ticked up a little bit. It may not get any colder than it did earlier in November. We're going to be looking for a stratospheric warming this winter, which is when the stratospheric temperature, you know, when you've got a stratospheric warming, stratospheric temperature will shoot up there somewhere. You definitely know when the warming is going on. Can't say whether we're going to have a stratospheric warming this winter. A westerly QBO would tend to favour perhaps no stratospheric warming. Not every winter has a stratospheric warming, and the ones that don't tend to be westerly QBO winters. But we're going to be looking out for one, and with the weak solar activity, again, it's possible that we could get one. We got one in 2011-2012, interestingly, and that winter had a bigger spike in activity than the one we've just been through. So, again, swings and roundabouts. Siberian snow cover next. This is for the 1st of October, and we have pretty good cover across eastern parts of Siberia, not much further west. Let's run through to the 10th of October, 10 days later. And yeah, the snow cover was really building up well for central and eastern parts of Siberia. Massive increase through to the 20th of October, pushing westwards all the time. Things look really good at this point. We was well above average, and I think many people were getting quite exciting. But then we get a stall, and as we get through to the 30th of October, you can see there's been very little improvement in the snow cover activity through those final 10 days of October. We've had very little increase. And as we go into November, the stall just goes on really up to the 10th of November. No real increase, although Scandinavia has increased a little bit, but we're not pushing it westwards across Siberia, across western parts of Russia, I should say, as you would hope we would if you're looking for a cold winter. And again, to the 20th of November, still very, very slow pushing that Siberian snow cover into western parts of Russia. Finally, the latest chart, 29th of November, yeah, we're pushing it westwards finally. We are getting it to go westwards. But the stall that we had at the end of October and into November, getting into western Russia, has been quite impactful, I think. So what this implies, the big build-up in snow cover across central and eastern parts of Siberia early on, does imply, I think, that we're going to set up the Siberian high quite nicely around this area, or we have set it up quite nicely, and we're probably going to push it more that way, actually, up towards Canada and going into Northern America. So this is another pointer to a colder winter for Northern America. Because we didn't build the snow cover up quickly across central and excuse me, particularly western parts of Russia, because we didn't do that, we're struggling to get the Siberian high to retrogress eastwards. That's my theory on this. So I think, again, it's an impactful signal for Northern America. It's less significant this year for Europe and the British Isles. Last year it was very good. The Siberian snow cover quickly spread across the whole of Russia through October. You haven't had that this year, and the stall that occurred at the end of October into November, quite significant. Finally, we've been having a look at the autumn weather patterns. We're coming to the end now, so I'm going to come to the conclusion in a moment. But here's how September's temperature anomalies turned out. It was generally average to slightly above average across the parts of the country, and it was average to drier than average across most parts of the country in September as well. All of these charts from UK Met Office, by the way. October was much better than average, a warm October for England and Wales, but a very wet month away from Scotland, where it was near normal. But for England and Wales, a very, very wet month in October. So we had average, slightly above average temperatures in September, with dry than average, or average to dry than average. It was warm and wet in October. Haven't got November's anomalies through yet, unfortunately, but this was the latest update from Philippines Climate UK website, and up to the 23rd, excuse me, 23rd of November, we was running colder than average up to that point, drier than average, and sunnier than average. I wouldn't expect to see those anomalies change much when Philip updates Climate UK at any time in the next day or so. I think we'll be looking at a cooler than average month, not particularly a cold month, but I think it'll come in a few tenths of a degree below average. In terms of the rainfall, I think we're coming drier than average, and the sunshine doesn't really matter. So when you average it all out through the autumn, I think the autumn patterns this year have been, well, probably near normal in terms of precipitation, because we've been offsetting. We had a very wet sort of October, but a drier September and November. Nevertheless, because October was so wet, actually that could skewer the autumn. It may come out a little bit wetter than average. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. In terms of the temperatures, I think it's going to be a little bit above average, and again, that's mainly down to October being so very, very warm. So, can't really decipher much from the autumn weather patterns as well. And what you've got from this, as we've gone on through this, lots and lots of swings and roundabouts here. We've been led a merry dance this autumn. There's no significant pointers either way. We have got some things, the solar activity particularly, still points to the fact that we could have a colder winter. So does the Atlantic, being in the warm phase of the AMO. But we haven't got anything that's really pushing in. If we have a lot of solar activity, for instance, with Westerly QBO, that would be a good signal for a milder winter. If we had a strong La Nina with Westerly QBO and the solar maximum, that would be a pointer to a milder winter. But so normally, in a normal circumstance, this would be a mild winter. But the couple of things that are sort of pulling me back from that conclusion is the solar activity, and particularly the Atlantic. I think the tripole will emerge at some point through this winter, and when it does, it could coincide with some colder phases. So, in conclusion, I'm going to go for an average to a slightly, perhaps colder than average winter. And in terms of the precipitation, I think it could be in for a very dry winter. What I think is going to happen is that we're going to have a mid-Atlantic ridge, which is what I've got at the moment. I think that's going to dominate, particularly through December, possibly going on later into winter as well. That could keep it quite chilly with winds coming from a northwesterly or northerly direction, but I think it could keep it very dry. So I think we're going to have a drier winter this year, and I wouldn't be that surprised if it actually turned out to be exceptionally dry. It could be one of the very, very driest winters for a long time. But the temperatures are interesting because I think we do probably, when you average it all round, come out a little bit below average maybe, or certainly near normal to slightly below average. But there's going to be lots of variation to that. We'll get some very mild spells, I think, through this winter, but I think we could also get a very cold spell at some point. My tip for a very cold point, because it's what the CFS has been signalling, is January. I think we may set up a slightly different pattern in January, which is that we'll lose that mid-Atlantic ridge, set up a big trough in the Atlantic, a big low pressure, but also a big ridge of high pressure over Scandinavia. We could get a battle taking place, maybe lasting a week or two through January. That could be quite snowy and quite cold. So January would be my tip to be the coldest month. But overall, with this methodology, I can't really break it down into monthly periods that well. But what I do think, in summary, is that the GavsWeatherBiz.com forecast is going to be for this winter to be near normal to slightly colder than average temperatures, but with some significant mild spells in there as well. And for temperatures, I think we're probably, for rainfall, I think we're probably coming out quite dry. I think it's going to be a dry winter, and there is a chance, if that mid-Atlantic ridge persists through January, which I think could be a more unsettled month, if the mid-Atlantic ridge was to go on into January, it could be a very dry, maybe an exceptionally dry winter. So that's it. It's been a long haul. Thanks for sticking with it. Thanks for sticking with the video, and thanks for sticking with me through the autumn. Should just say that confidence in this forecast is very low. It's not a strong signal like we had last year for the winter forecast. So I'm going to wait and see how it goes. I won't be changing this forecast. I'm putting it out there. We'll see how it goes, and that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm going to leave you with a final written summary of what we predicted in this video, and just to say thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with me. Hope you enjoyed the video, and that's it for now. Just have a quick look at the written summary before we go. That's it. Thanks for watching.